They laughed at the broken farmhouse he inherited, until his dog uncovered something buried beneath it that no one was supposed to find. Ethan Cole had already lost everything before he ever set foot on that land. Betrayed by family, stripped of what little he had left, and carrying wounds no one could see, he drove into the mountains with only one thing still loyal to him: his dog, Scout. The place waiting for him was falling apart, forgotten, and feared by everyone around it. But the deeper Ethan went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an abandoned home. It was a place hiding something powerful, something dangerous, and something that had been waiting for him all along. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. So the first thing Ethan Cole noticed when he came home wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't. No voices, no laughter from the kitchen, no truck in the driveway that wasn't his, no light left on for him like someone had been waiting. Just silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, the kind that pressed against your chest and stayed there. He stood in front of the old house he used to call his, duffel bag hanging from his shoulder, boots still caked with dust from a place he couldn't quite leave behind. The porch boards creaked under his weight like they didn't recognize him anymore. The door was unlocked. It swung open too easily. Inside it felt emptied. Not just of things, but of presence. The couch was gone. The photographs that used to line the wall had been taken down, and leaving pale rectangles behind like ghosts of something better. The kitchen table, where his mother used to sit every morning with her coffee, was missing. Even the air felt different, stale, hollow. Ethan didn't call out. He already knew no one would answer. Upstairs, the bedroom was worse. The closet door stood open, half its contents stripped away, drawers pulled out. Empty hangers swaying slightly, tapping against each other with a hollow plastic click. A forwarded address taped to the mirror. No note. No explanation. Just gone. Ethan stared at his reflection for a long moment. He looked older than he remembered. Harder. The lines around his eyes deeper, like something inside him had been slowly carved out and never filled back in. Behind him, soft footsteps padded across the wooden floor. Scout. As the German shepherd moved quietly into the room, his ears alert, but his body relaxed in that careful way he always had, like he was reading the world before reacting to it. His dark eyes lifted to Ethan's face, searching. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Yeah," he muttered, voice low, rough. "Guess it's just us now." Scout stepped closer, pressing his side gently against Ethan's leg. Not pushing, not demanding. Just there. Always there. Ethan reached down, his hand resting on the dog's neck, fingers sinking into thick fur. Warm. Real. Something that hadn't disappeared. Something that hadn't walked away. Hours later, Ethan sat on the tailgate of his truck, parked just off a narrow dirt road outside town. The sky above him stretched wide and pale, clouds drifting slowly like they had nowhere else to be, and neither did he. A folded envelope rested in his hand. It had been sitting in the mailbox, buried beneath a stack of unpaid bills and notices he didn't bother opening. Legal paper. Official. He'd almost thrown it away. Almost. Scout sat beside him, watching the tree line with quiet focus. Every now and then his ears twitched, catching sounds Ethan didn't even hear. Ethan opened the envelope again, reading the words for what must have been the 10th time. Property transfer. Sole beneficiary. Appalachian region. He let out a dry, humorless breath. Figures. A farm, or what used to be one. left to him by a relative he barely remembered. Some branch of the family that had broken off long before he was old enough to ask questions. No sentimental value, no stories attached. Just land. Land no one wanted. He'd asked around earlier, stopping at a gas station on the edge of town, the kind of place where everyone knew everything before you even finished asking. The man behind the counter had laughed. "Coal place?" he'd said. "You serious?" Ethan hadn't smiled. The man's grin faded a little. "Ain't nobody lived out there proper in years," he added, voice lowering. "People tried, didn't last." "Why not?" Ethan had asked. The man shrugged, but his eyes shifted slightly, like he didn't want to say too much. "Place ain't right," he said. "That's all." Ethan hadn't pressed. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in things going wrong. And lately, everything had. Now, sitting on the edge of nowhere with nothing left tying him down, the idea of a broken farm in the mountains didn't sound much worse than anything else. At least it was quiet. At least no one there would pretend to care. Ethan folded the letter slowly, sliding it back into the envelope. He stared out at the road ahead, a thin stretch of dirt cutting through trees that grew thicker the farther it went. No signs, no lights, just distance. Scout shifted beside him, then looked up. Not at the road. At Ethan. Waiting. Ethan rubbed his jaw, exhaling slowly. "Yeah," he said after a long moment. "I know." He stood, tossing the envelope onto the passenger seat before climbing into the driver's side. The truck groaned as it came to life, engine rattling like it had something to complain about. Scout jumped in without being told, settling into his spot like he'd done 100 times before. Ethan rested his hands on the wheel, staring ahead. There wasn't anything left behind him. Nothing worth going back to. The house was gone. The people were gone. Whatever version of himself had once belonged there, that was gone too. He shifted the truck into gear. Gravel crunched under the tires as he pulled onto the road, the trees swallowing him up inch by inch. The farther he drove, the quieter it got. No traffic, no distant hum of a town, just the low growl of the engine and the occasional snap of branches under the tires. Scout stayed alert, head lifted, eyes scanning the woods as they passed. Every so often, he glanced at Ethan, like he was checking something, making sure. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but his mind drifted. Flashes of heat, dust, the sharp crack of something he tried not to name. Nights where sleep never came, and mornings that felt no different from the dark. He blinked hard, tightening his grip on the wheel. Not here, not now. The road curved sharply, climbing higher into the mountains. The air changed, cooler, thinner. The trees grew taller, closer together, their shadows stretching long across the narrow path. Then, finally, the farm. Or what was left of it. The truck slowed to a stop. Ethan didn't get out right away. He just sat there, staring. The house stood crooked at the edge of a clearing, its roof sagging in the middle like it had given up trying to hold itself together. The paint had peeled away years ago, leaving the wood beneath exposed and gray with age. Windows stared back at him, dark and empty. To the side, what used to be a barn leaned dangerously, one wall partially collapsed. Fencing lay broken in the tall grass, barely visible beneath weeds that had taken over everything. No movement, no sound, just stillness. Scout let out a low, almost inaudible rumble. Not a bark, not quite a growl, something in between. Ethan noticed. He glanced at the dog. Scout's eyes were fixed on the house. Ears forward, body tense. Ethan followed his gaze. The place didn't look haunted. It looked abandoned. But there was something about it. something that didn't sit right. He shook it off. "Yeah," he muttered. "Looks about right." He opened the door, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud. The air smelled different here. Damp, earthy, like the ground held onto things longer than it should. Scout jumped down beside him, but didn't move forward. Ethan took a few steps toward the house, then stopped when he realized the dog wasn't following. He turned. Scout stood by the truck, muscles tight, eyes locked on the front porch, not afraid, but not willing to go any closer. Ethan frowned slightly. Scout!" The dog didn't move, just watched. Ethan exhaled slowly, glancing back at the house, then at Scout again. Something flickered in his chest. Not quite fear, not quite doubt, just a quiet awareness. He walked back, crouching slightly so he was level with the dog. "It's just a house," he said quietly. Scout's ears twitched, but he still didn't move. Ethan reached out, resting a hand against the side of his neck. Warm, steady, real. "Come on," Ethan murmured. For a second, nothing happened. Then slowly, Scout stepped forward. Not eager, not relaxed, but loyal. Always loyal. They moved together across the clearing, toward the house that no one wanted, toward the place that had been left behind, toward the only thing Ethan Cole had left. And as his boots touched the first step of the porch, the wood groaned beneath him, long and low, and like it had been waiting. Not for just anyone, but for him. And beside him, Scout didn't take his eyes off the door. Not for a second. The porch sagged under Ethan's weight as he took another step forward. The boards let out a long, splintering creak, like the house was warning him, or waking up. He paused. Not because he was afraid, but because Scout hadn't moved. Ethan turned slightly, just enough to glance over his shoulder. The dog stood a few feet behind him now, closer than before, but still not at his side. His body was low, muscles tight, ears forward, eyes locked on the door like it might move on its own. Ethan had seen that look before. Not in houses. In places where something didn't feel right. Places where instinct spoke louder than reason. He exhaled slowly and pushed the thought aside. "Oh, it's just old wood," he muttered, more to himself than the dog. The front door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. The paint had peeled away in strips, exposing weathered gray beneath. The handle was cold when Ethan reached for it. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he turned it. The door opened with a drawn-out groan, scraping against the warped floor as if it hadn't been used in years. Inside, the air was thick. Not dusty, though there was plenty of that, but heavy, like it had been sitting still for too long. Ethan stepped in. The floor shifted under his boots, uneven but holding. The room was dim, light filtering through cracked windows in thin, pale beams that cut across the darkness. He waited, listened. Nothing. No movement. No hidden presence. Just the quiet hum of a place that had been left behind. As Ethan walked further inside, his eyes adjusting. A table sat near the far wall, one leg shorter than the others, leaning slightly to the side. A rusted lantern rested on top, coated in a fine layer of dust. Shelves lined the walls, half empty, their contents long gone. To the left, a doorway led into what used to be a kitchen. To the right, a narrow hallway disappeared into shadow. Ethan set his bag down near the door. "All right," he said quietly. Scout still hadn't entered. Ethan turned back. The dog stood at the threshold now, one paw just inside, the rest of him still outside. His head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as he tested the air. Then, slowly, he stepped in, not relaxed, not comfortable, but unwilling to leave Ethan alone. The moment Scout crossed the threshold, something shifted. Not visibly, not in a way Ethan could point to, but it was there. A subtle change in the air. A pressure, almost. Ethan ignored it. He moved toward the kitchen, boots crunching lightly against debris scattered across the floor. Broken glass, old leaves, pieces of wood that had fallen from somewhere above. The kitchen was worse than the main room. Cabinets hung open, some torn from their hinges. The sink was stained dark, the faucet rusted over. A narrow window above it looked out toward the tree line, but the glass was so clouded it barely let in any light. Ethan ran a hand across the counter. Dust. Thick. Untouched. Good. That meant no one had been here recently. He turned, scanning the room again. No signs of life. No footprints. No movement. Just an empty place, forgotten by everyone else. Exactly what he needed. Behind him, Scout moved quietly through the house, nails clicking softly against the wood. But instead of exploring freely, he stayed close, circling Ethan, checking corners, pausing at doorways like he was mapping the place out in his mind. Always alert, always working. Ethan watched him for a moment. "Relax," he said. Scout didn't. He moved past Ethan and into the hallway, stopping at its edge. His body stiffened again, head lowering slightly. Ethan followed his gaze. The hallway stretched out longer than it should have, shadows pooling at the far end where the light couldn't quite reach. A staircase ran up along the left wall, its railing broken in places. The air there felt colder, not by much, but enough. Ethan stepped closer. Scout didn't follow. Instead, the dog let out a low sound, quiet, controlled, not panic, warning. Yet Ethan stopped. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then Ethan shook his head, turning away. "Later," he said. He wasn't here to chase shadows. Not today. He moved back into the main room, grabbing his bag and setting it near the fireplace. The stone was cracked, blackened from years of use, but intact enough to try. He knelt, clearing out old ash with slow, steady movements. Work. That's what he needed. Something simple. Something real. Outside, the light was already beginning to fade. The mountains didn't hold on to daylight long. By the time Ethan managed to get a small fire going, the house had grown darker. The flames flickered weakly at first, then caught, casting uneven light across the room. Scout settled near the door, not lying down, just sitting, watching. Ethan leaned back against the wall, eyes fixed on the fire. The warmth barely reached him, but it was enough to take the edge off. For the first time since he arrived, the silence didn't feel quite as heavy. Not comfortable, but manageable. He reached into his bag, pulling out a can of food and a small pocket knife. The metal scraped as he opened it, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet room. Scout didn't react, didn't look away from the hallway. Ethan noticed. "Hey," he said, tossing a small piece of food onto the floor near him. Scout didn't move. Ethan frowned slightly. "That bad, huh?" Still nothing. The fire cracked softly. The wind outside brushed against the walls, low and steady. And somewhere deeper in the house, something shifted. Ethan's head turned slightly. He listened. Nothing. Just the fire. Just the wind. He exhaled slowly, while forcing his shoulders to relax. Old houses made noise. That's all this was. Wood settling, temperature changing. Nothing more. He looked back at Scout. The dog hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, still staring into the hallway, still listening to something Ethan couldn't hear. The firelight flickered, shadows stretching along the walls. And for a brief moment, just a moment, Ethan had the strange, unshakable feeling that the house was listening back. He didn't say it out loud, didn't even let the thought fully form. Because once you gave something like that shape, it stayed. Instead, he shifted his weight, leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on the fire. The flames flickered unevenly, shadows stretching and pulling across the walls like they had a life of their own. Outside, the wind picked up, as it slid along the sides of the house, low and steady at first, then sharper, whistling through cracks in the wood, rattling loose shutters somewhere above. The whole place breathed, or maybe it just sounded like it did. Ethan rubbed his hands together, more out of habit than cold. His body still held on to old patterns. Stay alert, stay awake, never fully settle. Across the room, Scout hadn't moved, still sitting, still watching that hallway. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt different here, slower, heavier. Eventually, exhaustion began to press in, not gently, not like sleep, more like something pulling him down. Ethan leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for just a second. Just a second. The fire cracked softly, the wind shifted, and somewhere deep in the house, a sound. Ethan's eyes snapped open. Oh, not the wind, not the fire. Something else. A low, dragging noise. Faint at first, then again. Long, slow, like something heavy being pulled across wood. Ethan didn't move right away. He listened. The sound came again, this time clearer, from beneath him. Scout was already on his feet. The dog's entire body had changed, tense, alert, focused in a way Ethan had only seen in the worst places. His ears locked forward, tail stiff, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan pushed himself up slowly. The floor creaked under his weight. The sound stopped. Silence rushed in, thick and sudden. Ethan held his breath. Nothing. He glanced at Scout. The dog hadn't relaxed, hadn't even blinked. Still staring. But not at the hallway anymore. At the floor, the same spot from earlier. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. "All right," he muttered under his breath. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, controlled. The wood beneath his boots felt uneven, softer in places. Old, weak. Scout moved ahead of him, circling the spot, nose low, breathing in short bursts. Then, suddenly, he started pawing at it again. Harder this time, faster. The sound of claws scraping against wood cut through the silence. "Hey," Ethan said, stepping forward. "Easy." Scout didn't stop. The growl in his chest deepened. Ethan crouched, reaching out, placing a firm hand on the dog's side. "Scout." The dog froze, just for a second. Then he stepped back, but his eyes never left the floor. Ethan leaned in. The boards looked like the rest of the house, worn, cracked, aged beyond their time. But now that he was closer, there it was, a thin line, barely visible, on a seam where two boards didn't quite meet the same way as the others. Ethan ran his fingers along it. The wood shifted, just slightly. A hollow sound followed. His jaw tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. He pushed harder. The board gave way with a dull snap, and suddenly, the floor beneath him collapsed. Ethan didn't have time to react. The wood cracked open, splintering downward as his weight dropped with it. But before he fell completely, something slammed into him, hard. "Scout!" The dog lunged forward, hitting Ethan square in the chest, knocking him sideways. Ethan hit the ground, rolling hard onto his shoulder, just as the section of floor gave out completely where he'd been standing. A jagged hole opened up. Dark, deep, silent. Ethan lay there for a second, stunned, breath knocked from his lungs. And a Scout stood over him, barking now. Sharp, urgent, almost angry. Ethan sucked in a breath, pushing himself up slowly. Easy, easy. His voice came out rough. He looked back. The hole yawned open in the floor, edges splintered and unstable. Beneath it, nothing but darkness. No bottom visible. Just empty space. Ethan stared at it, then at Scout. The dog's chest rose and fell quickly, eyes wide, locked onto Ethan like he was making sure he was still there. Still alive. Ethan swallowed. Yeah, he said quietly. I got it. He reached out, placing a hand on Scout's neck, gripping firmly. The dog leaned into it. Not just comfort. Connection. Ethan looked back at the hole again. That hadn't been random. The wood hadn't just given out. Not like that. It had been weakened. Deliberately. He pushed himself to his feet, moving carefully around the edge, peering down into the darkness. The air rising from below was colder. Damp. And there was something else. A smell. Faint. Metal. Earth. Old. Ethan stepped back. The house groaned softly around him, like it was settling again after the collapse. Or adjusting. Scout moved closer to the edge, sniffing, then letting out another low growl. Ethan watched him. Yeah, he said again, quieter this time. Not just a house, not just old wood. Something was under there, something hidden. And whatever it was, Scout had known before he did. Ethan grabbed the lantern from the table, shaking it slightly until it flickered to life. The weak glow barely reached the edges of the room, but it was enough. He stepped toward the hole again. Scout stayed glued to his side. Together. Always together. Ethan crouched, lowering the lantern slightly. The light spilled downward, cutting into the darkness below, and for a brief second, he saw it. Not clearly. Just enough. Wood. Support beams. And something else. Something that didn't belong to a simple farmhouse. Ethan pulled the lantern back. His jaw tightened. The silence returned, thicker than before. He stood slowly. All right, he said under his breath, but there was no certainty in it. Just resolve. Behind him, the fire cracked again. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the walls, and somewhere deep beneath the house, something shifted. Waiting for him to come back. Ethan didn't sleep. Not really. He sat near the fire most of the night, the lantern turned low, the hole in the floor just a few feet away, dark, open, and impossible to ignore. On every time the wind shifted or the house creaked, his eyes went back to it. Scout never lay down, not once. He paced, slow circles at first, then tighter ones, always drifting back to the same spot, the edge of the broken floor, nose low, ears forward, listening. Whatever was down there, the dog knew it mattered, and that was enough for Ethan. By the time the sky began to pale through the cracked windows, Ethan was already on his feet. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The room felt colder now, sharper in the morning air. Dust hung in the light, drifting lazily like the house itself had exhaled overnight. Ethan stepped carefully around the hole again, boots testing each board before putting his weight down. He crouched, looked again. Nothing had changed. The darkness below still swallowed the light, and still held whatever it was that didn't belong. Behind him, Scout let out a short, sharp sound. Ethan turned. The dog wasn't looking at the hole this time. He was looking at Ethan. Then, without hesitation, Scout moved forward, pressing his nose to the floor a few feet from the break. Different spot. He pawed at it once, twice, then harder. The wood rattled under his claws. Ethan frowned. Not there, he said quietly, stepping over. Scout didn't stop. If anything, he dug faster, more urgent. Ethan watched him for a second. then crouched beside him. The floor here looked intact, stronger. No visible seams like the one that had given way. But Scout wasn't guessing. He never guessed. Ethan pressed his palm flat against the wood, listened, knocked once. A dull, solid sound. He shifted slightly, knocked again. Hollow. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Well, he muttered. He stood, grabbing the old iron poker from beside the fireplace. The metal was cold in his hand, heavier than it looked. Scout stepped back just enough to give him space, but not far. Never far. Ethan drove the poker down between the boards. Once, twice. On the third strike, the wood cracked. A sharp, splintering sound echoed through the room. Ethan pried upward. The board lifted, and beneath it, another space. Not a collapse this time. Not a broken cavity. Something cleaner, deliberate. Ethan set the poker aside and pulled the board free with both hands. It came loose with resistance, dust spilling from the edges. A narrow opening revealed itself, just wide enough to see inside. He leaned in, lowering his head slightly. When the air that rose from below was colder than before, sharper and clearer. The lantern light reached just enough to show wooden beams, evenly spaced, a structured gap beneath the floor, not random decay, not rot, built. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone did this, he said under his breath. Scout let out a low sound again. Not fear, recognition. Ethan reached into the opening, feeling along the inside edge. His fingers brushed against something hard. Not dirt, not stone. He shifted his grip and pulled. A small object slid free into his hand. A box, wooden, worn, edges rounded with age. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then glanced at Scout. The dog stood still, watching him, not the box. Ethan brushed dust from the surface. No lock, no markings, just old wood, smoothed by time. He opened it slowly, and inside, a photograph, black and white, faded at the edges. Ethan's breath caught before he could stop it. A man stood in the center of the image. Broad shoulders, straight posture, eyes that didn't smile even though his mouth did. There were others around him, men, maybe family, but Ethan didn't see them. He only saw the face, because it looked like his. Not exactly, but close enough that something in his chest tightened. Same jawline, same eyes, same quiet weight behind them. Ethan turned the photo over. The back was marked in faded ink. Cole family, 1978. His grip tightened slightly. Beneath it, written in smaller letters, "Don't trust the land records." The room felt colder. Ethan stared at the words, then at the photo again. Scout stepped closer, nudging Ethan's arm lightly. Ethan blinked, grounding himself. "Yeah," he said quietly. Not random, not abandoned. This place had a history, and it wasn't done talking. He reached back into the opening. There was more. A folded piece of paper, brittle with age. He pulled it out carefully, unfolded it. The handwriting was rough, uneven, like it had been written quickly, or under pressure. Ethan read silently. Then again, slower. His chest rose and fell deeper now. "They lied," he murmured. Scout tilted his head slightly. Ethan swallowed. "They said the land was sold, passed on, gone." He shook his head. It wasn't. He looked back at the hole, then at the house around him. The broken walls, the empty rooms, the silence. All of it suddenly felt different, not abandoned, hidden. He stood slowly, the paper still in his hand. Scout stayed close, just brushing lightly against his leg as if to steady him. Ethan walked to the window, wiping away a thin layer of dust with his sleeve. Outside, the trees stood still, watching. The world looked normal, quiet, unchanged. But inside the house, everything had shifted. He looked back at the hole in the floor, then at the photograph in his hand. The face staring back at him didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like a message, a warning, or maybe an invitation. Scout moved beside him again, eyes flicking between Ethan and the opening in the floor. Waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. Not to the dog, not to himself, to whatever had been left behind. He folded the paper carefully, slipping it into his pocket. The photograph followed. Then he turned back toward the opening. The boards creaked under his weight. The air shifted again, and for the first time since he arrived, Ethan didn't feel like he had come here by accident. He felt like he had been led. And Scout had known the whole time. Ethan didn't say anything for a while. He just stood there, the photograph still in his hand, the folded paper heavy in his pocket, the open floor at his feet like a wound that refused to close. Scout stayed close, closer than before, not pacing now, not restless, just there, pressed lightly against Ethan's side, steady and warm like an anchor. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see what else you've got." He crouched again beside the opening, lowering the lantern carefully. The light spilled down into the space beneath the floor, stretching farther this time as his eyes adjusted. It wasn't a pit, not a collapse. It was a crawl space, structured, intentional. The beams weren't rotted through. They were aged, yes, but still holding. And the ground beneath wasn't dirt. It was packed, leveled, used. Ethan leaned in further, shifting his weight carefully, then reached down and grabbed the edge of the opening. He tested it once, then again. It held. He swung one leg over, lowering himself slowly until his boots touched the ground below. The air hit him first, cold, still, and carrying that same faint metallic scent. Scout let out a sharp sound above him. Ethan glanced up. "I'm good," he said quietly. Scout didn't look convinced. Ethan lowered the lantern fully, the light widening across the narrow space. The beams overhead pressed low. He had to hunch slightly. But there was enough room to move, but barely. He took a step forward. The floor didn't shift, didn't give. This part of the house wasn't falling apart. It had been built to last. Ethan moved slowly, scanning the space. At first, it looked empty. Just shadows and beams and the underside of the house. Then he saw it. A small crate. Tucked against the far side, half hidden behind one of the support posts. Ethan approached it carefully. The wood was darker than the box he'd found upstairs, heavier, more worn, like it had been handled more often, or hidden in a hurry. He set the lantern down beside it, knelt. His fingers hovered over the lid for a second. Then he opened it. Inside, papers. Several of them. Folded, stacked, edges yellowed with time. Ethan picked up the top one, unfolded it. The handwriting hit him first. Uneven, heavy in places, and lighter in others. Like whoever wrote it had stopped and started again, over and over. Ethan read silently, then again. His jaw tightened. "This isn't finished," he murmured. The letter had no ending, no signature, just lines that stopped mid-thought. He swallowed, then started from the beginning again, slower this time. "If you're reading this, then it means they didn't find everything." Ethan's eyes flicked upward instinctively. The space above him creaked softly. He forced his focus back to the page. They're changing records, names disappearing, files rewritten like we never existed. His breath slowed. They say we're unstable, that we don't belong out there anymore. But that's not the truth. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. The next lines were darker. He's behind it, not alone but at the center. As we thought we could trust him, we were wrong. Ethan frowned. He? Scout barked once above him, sharp. Ethan looked up again. I hear you, he said quietly. But he didn't climb out, not yet. He kept reading. They're watching the land. Not all of it, but enough. This place is the last one they don't fully control. Ethan's eyes moved faster now. We built it to hold, to hide what matters. If it ever comes back to family, maybe it won't be for nothing. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. The last line trailed off. If my son ever, and then, nothing. The sentence ended there. No signature. No date. Just silence. Ethan stared at the unfinished words for a long moment. My son. He whispered it under his breath. The sound didn't echo. It just hung there. Heavy. Real. Scout let out a low whine from above. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. His hand moved to the photograph in his pocket. He pulled it out, looked at it, then back at the letter. Something inside him shifted. Not violently, not suddenly, but enough. The man in the photograph, the name on the back, the letter that was never sent. All of it connected, and for the first time since he'd stepped onto the property, Ethan didn't feel like a stranger here. He felt like he'd been expected. Above him, the floor creaked again. Scout barked, louder this time, urgent. Ethan's head snapped up. All right, he said, pushing himself to his feet. I'm coming. He grabbed the papers quickly, folding them and tucking them into his jacket. Then he lifted the lantern and moved back toward the opening. The climb up was slower, more careful. And by the time he pulled himself back onto the main floor, Scout was already there, waiting, eyes locked on him, body tense. The moment Ethan cleared the edge, Scout stepped forward, pressing against him, checking, making sure. Ethan rested a hand on his neck. I'm all right, he said, but his voice didn't carry the same certainty as before. Scout didn't move away. Instead, he turned, sharp, immediate, and looked toward the front of the house. Ethan followed his gaze. The door, still closed, still quiet, but something about it felt different. Ethan stood slowly. The letter weighed against his chest now. The unfinished sentence echoed in his mind. If my son ever... A sound broke the silence. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A vehicle, somewhere beyond the trees. Ethan's entire body went still, and Scout's ears snapped forward. The engine noise cut through the quiet, then faded, then stopped. Too close. Ethan moved to the window, wiping away the dust again, peering out into the tree line. At first he saw nothing. Just branches, shadows, stillness. Then, a flicker of movement. Far off. Too far to make out clearly, but not natural, not wind, not animals. Scout growled, low, deep. Ethan's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said quietly. Not just history, not just secrets buried in the past. Someone knew, someone had been watching this place, and now they knew he was here. The house creaked softly behind him. The hole in the floor still open. The hidden space below no longer just a discovery, but a warning. Ethan stepped back from the window. His hand tightened on Scout's collar. Stay close, he murmured. No, Scout didn't need to be told. He already was. And somewhere beyond the trees, something waited, just like the house had. but not for the same reason. Ethan didn't move for a long moment. His eyes stayed fixed on the trees, searching for any sign that what he'd seen was real, or just his mind filling in the blanks. Nothing. The branches stood still. The shadows didn't shift. If someone had been there, they were gone now. Scout didn't relax. The low growl stayed in his chest, steady and controlled, his body angled toward the tree line like he was waiting for something to step out. Ethan stepped away from the window. Slow. Measured. "All right," he murmured, more to steady himself than anything else. He moved through the room, scanning quickly now, not just looking, but assessing. The broken boards in the floor, plus the open space beneath, the single door leading in and out. Too exposed. Too open. He grabbed his bag, pulling out a small flashlight, checking the beam. Still strong. Scout stayed close. Closer than before. Not circling now. Guarding. Ethan walked to the door, placing his hand on the handle. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he listened. Nothing but the wind. No footsteps. No voices. No engine. He opened the door just enough to look outside. The clearing stretched out in front of him, the same as before. Quiet. Empty. The truck sat where he left it. No movement around it. No tracks he could see from here. Ethan stepped out onto the porch. The air felt colder now, sharper. He moved down the steps slowly, boots crunching against the dirt. Scout stayed tight at his side. They crossed the clearing together, and heading toward the edge of the trees where Ethan thought he'd seen movement. Every step felt louder out here. Every sound carried. Ethan's eyes scanned the ground. There, near the edge of the grass, a mark, not deep, but fresh. A partial print in the dirt. Boot, not his. Ethan crouched, running his fingers lightly along the edge. Still soft. Recent. Scout moved ahead of him, nose low, following the trail into the trees. "Easy," Ethan said quietly. But he followed. Branches brushed against his shoulders as they stepped into the forest. The light dimmed immediately, filtered through layers of leaves and shadow. The ground here was uneven. Roots twisting up through the dirt. Rocks hidden beneath fallen leaves. Scout moved with purpose. Not rushing. Not panicked. Tracking. Ethan kept up, eyes flicking between the ground and the trees around them. The trail wasn't obvious. Whoever had come through here knew how to move. But they'd left something behind. A broken branch. A scuffed patch of dirt. A faint shift in the natural pattern of the forest. Ethan's breathing slowed. Focused. This he understood. Not the house, not the hidden letters, but this. Movement. Intent. Someone had been here. And they hadn't wanted to be seen. Scout stopped. Suddenly, Ethan froze behind him. The dog stood rigid, head angled slightly to the right, listening. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Then, a sound. Soft. Quick. Something moving through the trees. Not far. Ethan's body tightened instinctively. "Hey!" he called out. No answer. The sound stopped. Silence rushed back in. Scout barked once, sharp, while cutting through the stillness. Then he lunged forward. "Scout!" Too late. The dog disappeared between the trees, moving fast. Ethan took off after him. Branches snapped under his boots as he pushed forward, trying to keep the dog in sight. "Scout!" No response. Just the sound of movement ahead. Faster now. More urgent. Ethan pushed harder, ducking under low branches, slipping once on loose dirt before catching himself. Then, a sharp yelp. Ethan's heart dropped. "Scout!" He broke through a cluster of brush into a small clearing. Scout stood in the center, but something was wrong. The dog's posture had changed. Lower, tense, one front paw lifted slightly off the ground. Ethan slowed, approaching carefully. "Hey! Hey!" Scout didn't back away, but he didn't come forward either. Ethan crouched, reaching out slowly. The dog let him. His fingers brushed along Scout's leg, then stopped. Warm. Wet. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Damn it!" A shallow cut along the side of Scout's leg. Not deep, but fresh. Blood dark against the fur. Scout's ears flicked back slightly, but he didn't make a sound, didn't pull away, just stood there, waiting. Ethan looked up, scanning the clearing. Whatever had been here was gone. No movement, no sound, just the aftermath. Ethan exhaled slowly, pushing the anger down. "All right," he said quietly. "All right. We're good." He pulled a small kit from his bag, working quickly, cleaning the cut, wrapping it tight. Scout stayed still through all of it. Didn't flinch. Didn't complain. When Ethan finished, he rested his hand against the dog's neck, holding it there for a second longer than necessary. "Oh, you don't run off like that," he muttered. But there was no real anger in it. Just relief. And something else. Fear. Not of the woods. Not of whoever had been watching. But of losing the one thing he had left. Scout leaned into him slightly. Just enough. Ethan stood slowly, eyes scanning the trees again. Empty. But not safe. Not anymore. "Come on," he said. They moved back toward the house together. Slower this time. More careful. By the time they stepped back into the clearing, the sun had dropped lower in the sky, shadows stretching long across the ground. The house stood where they left it, silent, still. But it didn't feel empty anymore. Not after what they'd found. Not after what had come looking. Ethan stopped halfway across the clearing, turned back once more toward the trees. Nothing moved. But he knew. They weren't alone out here. Hadn't been from the start. He turned back toward the house. Scout stayed at his side, limping slightly but steady. As they reached the porch, the boards creaked again under their weight. The door stood open. Just as he'd left it. But now, it didn't feel like an abandoned place. It felt like a line. One side of it held answers buried in the past. The other held something else, something watching. Something waiting. Ethan stepped inside. Scout followed. And as the door closed behind them, the quiet returned. But it wasn't the same quiet anymore. Now, it had teeth. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust again to the dim interior. The house hadn't changed, but he had. Before, it had been empty. Now it was occupied. Not by people he could see, but by intent. Scout moved past him slowly, favoring his injured leg, but refusing to lag behind. The dog circled once, then settled near the open floor, his attention fixed on the same place that had drawn him since the first night. Ethan shut the door behind them. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Too final. He locked it. It wasn't much of a barrier, but it was something. He turned back toward the center of the room, his eyes landing on the broken boards, the open space beneath, the second opening Scout had uncovered. The letter in his pocket felt heavier now. Not just a warning, a responsibility. Ethan walked over slowly, crouching again beside the opening. Scout rose immediately, moving to his side. "You're not done with this, are you?" Ethan murmured. Scout didn't look at him, didn't blink, just stared into the dark space beneath the house. Ethan exhaled. "Yeah. Me neither." He grabbed the lantern and lowered it once more. The light spilled down, steady this time, revealing more than before. The beams beneath weren't random. They formed a pattern, a path, not straight, but deliberate. Ethan leaned further in, shifting the lantern to widen the glow there. Beyond the initial support beams, a break, not in the wood, in the space, like the crawl space extended deeper than the house itself. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That's not right." Scout stepped forward, nose dipping toward the opening again. Then, without hesitation, he lowered himself and slipped through. "Scout!" Ethan lunged forward instinctively, but the dog was already gone, his body disappearing into the narrow gap with surprising ease. For a second, there was nothing, just silence. Then, a faint sound. Claws against wood. Movement. And then a low bark. Not alarm. Calling. Ethan froze. His chest tightened. "You gotta be kidding me." He ran a hand over his face, then looked down into the opening again. Scout barked once more. Closer this time. Not panicked. Waiting. Ethan let out a slow breath. "All right," he muttered. "You don't get to go down there alone." He set the lantern down beside the opening, then tested the edges again with his weight. Still solid. Good enough. He lowered himself carefully, boots finding the ground beneath. The air wrapped around him immediately, colder than before. Still. But now, it felt different. Not just empty. Occupied. Ethan grabbed the lantern and straightened as much as the low ceiling allowed. "Scout?" he called quietly. When a soft sound echoed back, ahead, Ethan moved forward. The crawl space narrowed at first, forcing him to hunch further, but after a few steps it opened slightly, enough to move more freely. The beams gave way to something else, not natural support. Framing, walls. Ethan slowed. This wasn't just for the house. He pushed forward. The lantern light stretched further, revealing more detail. Wooden planks lined the sides. Reinforced. Intentional. Someone had built this. Not as an afterthought, but as part of the structure. Scout appeared ahead, standing still at the edge of something. Ethan approached carefully. "What did you—" He stopped. The space opened up. Not large, but bigger than the crawl space behind him. A narrow corridor, leading deeper. Away from the house. Ethan stared. This goes out?" Scout stepped forward into the corridor, then looked back at him. Waiting. Ethan swallowed. This wasn't just a hidden space. This was a way out. Or a way in. He adjusted his grip on the lantern. "Stay close," he said. Scout moved beside him immediately. Together, they stepped into the tunnel. The air shifted again, colder, damp, the smell of earth stronger now. Their footsteps echoed softly against the narrow walls. Ethan moved slowly, scanning every inch. Marks along the wood, scratches, wear patterns. This place had been used, often. Not abandoned, not forgotten. Used. He ran his hand lightly along the wall. The wood was smoother in places, polished by contact. People moving through here, back and forth, for years. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. This wasn't just hiding something. He trailed off, because he already knew. It was moving something, or someone. Scout stopped again. Ethan halted beside him. The dog's ears lifted, head tilting slightly as he listened. Then he stepped forward once more. The tunnel curved slightly, just enough to block the view ahead. Ethan followed, and then it opened again. This time into a room, not large but complete, finished. The walls were reinforced with thicker beams. A small wooden table stood against one side. Shelves lined the far wall, empty now, but not always. Ethan stepped in slowly. The air here felt different, still cold, but less suffocating. Scout moved ahead, sniffing along the edges of the room, then circling back to Ethan's side. Ethan lowered the lantern onto the table. Dust shifted in the light. The room had been untouched for a long time, but it hadn't been forgotten. He scanned the shelves, scratches where items had once sat, indentations in the wood, missing pieces, taken, not lost. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone cleared this out. Scout moved to the far wall, sniffing along the base. Then he pawed at it. Once, twice, Ethan watched him. Not again. He stepped closer. The wall looked solid, same as the rest. But Scout kept digging, more insistent now. Ethan crouched, running his fingers along the seam. There, barely visible. A line. He pressed. Nothing. He shifted his hand, pressed again. A soft click. Ethan froze. Then, the panel shifted, just slightly, enough to reveal a narrow gap behind it. Ethan exhaled slowly. You've got to be kidding me. Scout stepped back, giving him space, and Ethan pulled the panel open carefully. Behind it, darkness again, but deeper, older. And this time, he could feel it. Not just a hidden space, something bigger, something buried. Ethan looked down at Scout. The dog's eyes met his, steady, certain. Ethan nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. They weren't even close to the bottom of this yet. And whatever was hidden down here, it wasn't meant to stay buried forever. Not if someone like him came looking, and not if Scout was the one leading the way. Ethan held the panel open for a moment longer, staring into the darkness beyond. The air that came from inside that hidden space felt different, colder, older, like it had been sealed away from the rest of the world for a long time. Scout stepped forward first. No hesitation, no fear, just quiet certainty. Ethan followed. The opening forced him to turn slightly, shoulders brushing against the edges as he slipped through. The lantern light narrowed, swallowed quickly by the space around him. Then the ground shifted. Not dirt, not wood. Stone. Ethan lowered the lantern. The light spread slowly across the floor. Flat stone. Even. Laid with intention. He straightened as much as the ceiling allowed. This wasn't part of the farmhouse anymore. This was something else. Scout moved ahead, paws silent against the stone, his breathing steady but focused. Ethan followed. The passage was short, only a few steps. Then it opened. The room beyond was larger than anything he expected. Not massive, but enough. The walls were lined with reinforced beams, thicker than the ones in the tunnel. Shelving units stretched along both sides, and some empty, some holding objects long untouched. At the center, a long table. Dust covered everything, but not evenly. Some areas were disturbed. Recently. Ethan's chest tightened. They've been here. He stepped closer, the lantern shaking slightly in his hand. Scout circled the room once, then came back to him, staying close now, watching, guarding. Ethan moved to the shelves. Most of them were empty, but not all. On one side, files, stacked, bound, faded labels still visible under the dust. Ethan reached out, pulling one free. The cover cracked slightly as he opened it. Inside, pages, typed, official, stamped, names, dates, coordinates. His eyes moved quickly, then slowed. then stopped. No, he turned the page. Another name, another file, another record. All the same format, now all the same structure. But something was wrong. Each file ended the same way. No closure, no resolution. Just gone. Ethan grabbed another and another. His breathing deepened. These are missing persons. Not civilians. Not random. The pattern was too clear. Every name, military, former service, different branches, different years. But all the same ending. Vanished. Scout let out a low sound. Ethan didn't look at him. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the pages, on the names, on the dates, until he saw it. At first, he didn't process it. Just another file, another name, another line. Then his mind caught up, and everything stopped. Ethan's hand froze mid-turn. His breath hitched slightly. The lantern trembled. No. He leaned closer, reading it again, slower this time, carefully, as if it might change. But it didn't. The name stayed the same. Daniel Cole. Ethan's father. The man he'd spent years believing had walked away. The man who had left without a word, without a reason, without coming back. Ethan stared at the page. The room around him disappeared. The tunnel, the house, the forest. All of it faded. There was only the name and the truth it carried. Scout stepped closer, pressing against his leg. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He read the file, every word, every line, each one hitting harder than the last. Last known location, Appalachian region. Status, unconfirmed. Case classification, restricted. Ethan's jaw tightened. Restricted, he repeated quietly. Not abandoned, not missing, hidden. He flipped through the rest of the file. There were notes, short, careful, like someone didn't want to write too much, didn't want to leave a trail. But even in the silence between the words, the truth was there. His father hadn't left. He'd disappeared, and not by accident. Ethan lowered the file slowly. His hand dropped to his side. The lantern cast long shadows across the room, stretching the shelves into something almost endless. Scout leaned into him again. Ethan finally moved. His hand came down, gripping the dog's fur tightly. Not rough, but firm, grounding. He didn't leave, Ethan said. His voice was low, flat. But underneath it, something cracked. He didn't walk out. Scout stayed still, listening. Ethan's eyes moved across the room again. All the names, all the files, all the people who had vanished the same way. They erased them, he said. The realization settled slowly. Heavy, permanent. They made it look like they were gone. Scout let out a soft breath. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Memories tried to surface. Old arguments, old silence. The way his mother never spoke about it. The way the town had filled in the blanks. He left. He didn't care. He chose to go. Ethan had believed it. Because it was easier. Because it made sense. Because the truth, this truth, was harder. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. Not outside. Inside. The anger was still there, but it had shifted. No longer aimless. Now it had direction. He looked down at the file one more time. then closed it carefully. Not like evidence, like something personal, something that mattered. Scout stepped slightly ahead while looking toward the far end of the room. Ethan followed his gaze. The shelves, the empty spaces, the missing pieces. Someone had taken things from here. Recently. The disturbed dust. The cleared sections. They weren't the first ones to find this place. And whoever had come through hadn't taken everything. Ethan's grip tightened on the file. "They're still looking," he said quietly. Scout's ears lifted. Ethan nodded once. "Or making sure no one else does." The room felt colder now. Not from the air, from the understanding. This wasn't history. Not just history. It was still happening. And his father had been part of it. Ethan slipped the file under his arm, not leaving it behind. Not now. He turned slowly, scanning the room one more time. All the names, all the stories. The lives that had been reduced to paper. Forgotten, erased. But not here. Not completely. Scout moved back to his side. "Ready." Ethan took a slow breath. "All right," he said. Not to the dog, not to the room, to whatever had started this, to whatever was still out there. "I see it now." And for the first time since he stepped onto that land, Ethan Cole wasn't just trying to survive. He was starting to understand what he had walked into, and what it might cost to stay. Ethan didn't move for a long time. The file in his hand felt heavier than it should have, not because of the paper, but because of what it meant. His father hadn't walked away. He had been taken out of the world, quietly, cleanly, erased. Ethan swallowed, forcing his thoughts to settle. This wasn't the time to break. Not down here. Not now. And Scout shifted beside him, pressing close again. The dog's presence was steady, grounding, something real in a place that felt like it was built on secrets. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he murmured. He set the file carefully on the table, then began scanning the rest of the room with sharper focus. This wasn't just about his father. This was bigger, much bigger. He moved along the shelves again, this time looking for patterns, not just names. And then he found it. A different set of documents, not files, ledgers, bound in thick, dark covers. Ethan pulled one down. Dust slid off the surface as he opened it. Inside, numbers, dates, transactions. His eyes narrowed. This wasn't military. This was money. Large sums, moved quietly, across accounts that didn't have names, just codes. Ethan flipped a few pages forward, so the entries became more detailed, more specific. Then, a name appeared, not on every page, but often enough to stand out. Victor Hale. Ethan said it under his breath. The name meant nothing at first. Just another person, another piece, but the more he read, the more it came up, always tied to transfers, always tied to movement, and always at the center. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's not just part of this. Scout's ears lifted slightly. Ethan looked at the page again. He's running it. The realization settled slowly. This wasn't random. This wasn't a system falling apart. This was controlled, organized. Someone had built this, and someone had kept it running. Victor Hale. Ethan flipped further. The entries went back years, decades. Different handwriting at first, then gradually changing. But the name stayed the same. Constant. Unchanging. Like a thread running through everything. Scout moved suddenly, sharp. Ethan's head snapped up. What is it? The dog was staring toward the tunnel. Not the room. Not the shelves. The way they had come in, Ethan listened. At first, nothing. Then, A sound. Faint, but real. Above them. A dull thud. Ethan's chest tightened. He grabbed the lantern. Another sound. Closer. A creak. Wood shifting. Not the house settling. Movement. Ethan moved fast now, grabbing the ledger, stuffing it into his jacket along with his father's file. "Come on," he said quietly. Scout didn't hesitate. They moved back into the tunnel. The air felt tighter now, more confined. Ethan's steps were quicker, more urgent, but controlled. The last thing he needed was to make noise. And another sound echoed faintly from above. A footstep. Heavy. Ethan froze mid-step. Scout went still beside him. They listened. The sound came again. Closer this time. Someone was inside the house. Ethan's pulse slowed. Not racing, not panicked. Focused. He moved forward again, faster now. The crawl space opened ahead. Light filtered faintly from above through the broken floor. Ethan lowered the lantern, dimming it instinctively. Less light. Less exposure. He crouched near the opening, listening. Footsteps. Clear now. Moving across the main room. Deliberate. Not searching randomly. Looking. Ethan's jaw tightened. They came back. Scout's muscles tensed. Ethan placed a hand on his neck. Quiet. The dog stilled instantly. Above them, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a voice. Low, muffled, not too far to make out clearly. Ethan held his breath. Another sound. Something being moved. Wood scraping. The broken floor. They were near it. Ethan's grip tightened. Scout shifted slightly. Ready. Ethan shook his head once. Not yet. Not like this. He leaned closer to the opening, just enough to see a sliver of the room above. Boots. 2 of them. Dark. Heavy. Standing near the edge of the hole. Ethan stayed perfectly still. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The men didn't look down. They didn't need to. One of them crouched, reaching toward the broken boards. Ethan's muscles coiled instinctively, but he held. The man examined the edge, touched the splintered wood, then stood again. A pause. Then, "They've been here," the man said. "Clear this time." "Close." Ethan's stomach tightened. A second voice answered. "Oh, too late." A shift in weight. Movement. They didn't get everything. Ethan's eyes flicked to the tunnel behind him, then back to the opening. The men stood there for a moment longer, thinking, calculating. Then one of them turned. Footsteps moved away. The other lingered. For just a second. Ethan didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Then, the second man followed. Their footsteps faded. The house creaked softly above. Then silence. Real silence this time. Ethan stayed still, counting. Seconds, minutes. He didn't know how long, only that he wasn't moving until he was sure. Scout stayed with him, unwavering. Finally, Ethan exhaled, slow, controlled. "They're not just watching," he whispered. Scout's ears twitched. "They're cleaning it up." Ethan glanced at the files inside his jacket. The ledger. His father's name. Victor Hale. Everything connected now. Not just a secret. A system. And someone out there, still protecting it. Ethan shifted back slowly from the opening. His mind was already moving, already planning. This wasn't about survival anymore. Not just survival. This was about truth. And whoever those men were, They weren't going to let it come out easily. Ethan looked at Scout. The dog met his gaze. Steady. Ready. Ethan nodded once. "All right," he said quietly. The fear was still there. The danger hadn't changed, but something else had taken its place. Resolve. They picked the wrong place to come back to. Above them, the house settled again, as if nothing had happened, as if it hadn't just been breached, as if it hadn't been watched. But Ethan knew better now. The silence wasn't safety, yet it was cover. And somewhere out there, Victor Hale was still pulling the strings, which meant this wasn't over, not even close. Ethan didn't rush. That was the first rule he'd learned long before this place, before the house, before the land, before everything fell apart. You don't rush when someone else is hunting. You slow down. You listen. He stayed in the crawl space for several more minutes, letting the silence settle again. No more footsteps. No voices. No movement above. Scout remained perfectly still beside him, muscles coiled but controlled, his breathing steady. Finally, Ethan nodded once. "All right," he whispered. They moved. Slowly, carefully. Ethan climbed up first, easing himself through the opening, keeping his weight low so the boards wouldn't creak more than they had to. Scout followed right behind. The room looked the same, at first glance, but Ethan saw it immediately. The difference. The broken floor had been disturbed, not repaired, not fixed, but examined, shifted. A few boards out of place. Dust scattered differently. They hadn't found the second opening. Not yet. Ethan exhaled quietly. Good. Scout moved ahead, checking the corners of the room again, then the hallway, then back to Ethan. Clear. For now. Ethan crossed to the door, opening it just enough to look outside. The clearing was empty, the truck untouched, the trees still. But that didn't mean anything anymore. He stepped back inside and shut the door again. Locked it. Pointless, maybe. But habit mattered. Routine mattered. Scout limped slightly as he returned to Ethan's side. Ethan noticed. "Come here," he said softly. Yet the dog didn't hesitate. Ethan crouched, checking the bandage, still holding, still clean. "Good," he murmured. Scout's tail moved once. Small, subtle. Ethan rested his forehead briefly against the dog's. Just a second. Then he pulled back. "We don't get another mistake," he said quietly. Scout didn't look away. Didn't need to. Ethan stood, scanning the room again. The fire had died completely now. The cold had settled in. The light outside was fading fast. Night was coming. And with it, less visibility. Less margin. Ethan moved quickly now, gathering what he needed. Flashlight, knife, the ledger and files secured inside his jacket. He kicked debris over part of the broken floor, not enough to hide it completely, but enough to make it look like nothing had changed. Scout watched him the entire time. Then, the sound. Not distant this time. Close. Too close. An engine, low, heavy. Ethan froze. Scout's ears snapped forward. The sound grew louder, then stopped. Right outside the clearing. Ethan moved instantly. "Back," he whispered. Scout followed him toward the side of the room, both of them dropping low out of direct view of the windows. Footsteps. Outside. More than one. Gravel shifting under weight. Ethan's pulse slowed. Focused. He counted. 1, 2, 3. At least 3 people. Moving toward the house. No attempt to hide it this time. No caution. They knew what they were doing. They knew he was here. Scout's body tensed. Ethan placed a hand lightly against his neck. Not yet. The footsteps reached the porch. Boards creaked. Then, a loud knock, hard, deliberate. Ethan didn't move. Yet another knock, stronger. "Open up!" The voice was sharp, confident, used to being obeyed. Ethan stayed silent. Scout didn't make a sound. The knock came again. Then, the handle turned. The door didn't open. Locked. A pause. Then a low chuckle from outside. "All right," the voice said. "We'll do it your way." Ethan's jaw tightened. He moved slightly, adjusting his position, eyes fixed on the door. Scout crouched beside him, ready. The first hit came fast. A heavy impact against the wood. The door shuddered. Another hit. Stronger. The frame cracked slightly. Ethan exhaled slowly. No panic. No hesitation. Just movement. "Now," he whispered. Scout surged forward before the third hit landed. The door burst inward, but not clean, not controlled. It slammed halfway open just as Scout hit the man closest to it, knocking him backward off the porch. A shout. Surprise. Chaos. Ethan moved immediately, not rushing, precise. He used the moment, the confusion. Two more men stood outside, caught off guard. Ethan stepped into the doorway, forcing them back, breaking their line. Scout was already moving again, not attacking blindly, but driving them away, keeping space between them and Ethan. "Back off!" one of the men shouted. Ethan didn't answer. Didn't need to. He held his ground. The second man stepped forward, then stopped. Something in Ethan's posture, in his stillness, made him hesitate. Scout growled low, positioning himself between Ethan and the men. The first man pushed himself up from the ground, anger flashing across his face. "You don't understand what you're messing with," he snapped. Ethan's eyes didn't leave him. "I understand enough." The man's expression hardened. "You think this is your land?" he said. "You think you own anything out here?" Ethan didn't respond. The man stepped closer. Scout lunged forward, not striking, warning. The man stopped again. The moment stretched, tight, fragile. Then, a shift, subtle, but enough. The men exchanged a glance. Something unspoken passed between them. Then the first man straightened, brushing dirt from his jacket. "This isn't over," he said. Ethan's voice came low. "I know." The man held his gaze for a second longer, then turned. The others followed. They moved back across the clearing without another word. No rush, no fear, just certainty. Ethan watched them until they disappeared into the trees. Scout didn't relax. Not even then. Ethan stepped back into the house slowly. The door hung broken on one hinge now. The cold air rushed in. He closed it as best he could. It didn't latch. Didn't matter. The line had already been crossed. Scout limped slightly as he returned to Ethan's side. Ethan looked down at him, then crouched. His hand moved to the dog's neck again. "You all right?" Scout leaned into him, just like before. Still here. Still standing. Ethan nodded slowly, then looked toward the broken door, the clearing, the trees beyond. "They're not just cleaning up anymore," he said quietly. Scout's ears twitched. "They're pushing." Ethan stood. The house creaked around them. The hidden tunnel beneath. The files. The names. His father. Victor Hale. All of it connected now. All of it moving. And this time, it wasn't just about what had been buried. Well, it was about what was still alive. Ethan's gaze hardened. "Good," he said under his breath. Because for the first time since he got here, he wasn't the one being hunted anymore. He was starting to push back, and they had just made it personal. The night settled in heavy, not quiet, not peaceful, but watchful. Ethan didn't try to fix the door again. There was no point. Whatever line had once separated this place from the outside world, it was gone. He moved through the house slowly, checking every corner, every shadow, every angle he could see from the dim light of the lantern. Scout stayed with him, closer than ever now. Each step measured, each sound tracked. The bond between them had shifted. Not just man and dog anymore. Something deeper. Something earned. Ethan stopped near the center of the room, looking down at the broken floor again, at the hidden opening, at everything beneath it. They came for this, he said quietly. Scout didn't look at the door, didn't look outside. His eyes were on the opening. Ethan followed his gaze, then nodded once. Yeah. Not just the land, not just the house. The truth. That's what they were protecting, and that's what they were afraid of losing. Ethan grabbed the lantern and dropped back down through the opening. Scout followed immediately, ignoring the pain in his leg. The tunnel felt different now. Not just hidden, alive. Every step carried weight. Every movement mattered. Ethan moved faster this time. No hesitation. No second guessing. The room at the end of the passage greeted him the same way it had before. Silent. Still. But no longer unknown. While he stepped to the table, pulling the ledger back out, opening it again. Victor Hale. The name stood out more now. Not just ink on paper. A target. A source. A reason. Ethan flipped further this time, past the transactions, past the coded entries, until he found something different. A set of documents bound together separately. Not financial, not operational, personal. Ethan opened it. Inside. Profiles. Detailed. Structured. Photographs clipped to the top of each page. Men. All of them. Ethan's chest tightened. Not random. Not strangers. Veterans. Each file carried notes. Short. Precise. Unstable. Uncooperative. Liability. Ethan's jaw tightened. They labeled them. Scout let out a low sound. Ethan flipped another page, then another. Each one the same. Men who had served, but men who had come back. Men who hadn't fit into whatever system had been built around them. And then, his father. Again. But this time, more. Ethan leaned closer, reading every line. Daniel Cole. Refused compliance. Maintained contact with other subjects. Relocated to secure site. Ethan's breath slowed. Secure site. This place, this farm, it wasn't just a hiding spot. It was a refuge. His father hadn't run. He had come here, chosen it. Ethan stepped back slightly. The room felt different now. Not like a secret, like a purpose. Scout moved beside him, pressing lightly against his leg. Ethan rested a hand on his head. They weren't hiding, he said quietly. They were protecting something. The realization settled deeper. This place, it wasn't abandoned. It had been used, built, maintained. For people like him. People who didn't fit anymore. People who had been pushed out. People who had been rewritten. Ethan looked around the room again. The shelves. The missing files. The cleared spaces. They came back for it, he said. Scout's ears lifted. Ethan nodded. They're not afraid of the place. He looked toward the tunnel. They're afraid of what it holds. The house above creaked faintly. A reminder. Not haunted. Not cursed. Just misunderstood. Ethan closed the file slowly, carefully, then placed it back on the table. Not everything needed to be taken. Some things needed to stay, needed to be protected. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned. Scout moved with him. They headed back through the tunnel, up through the crawlspace, back into the house. The cold air hit him again as he stepped onto the main floor. The broken door still hung open. The night beyond darker now, but less unknown. Ethan walked to the doorway, stopped, looked out across the clearing. Nothing moved. But he didn't feel watched anymore. Not in the same way. The fear had shifted, transformed, into something else. Understanding. He stepped back inside, looked around the house again. The cracked walls, the sagging beams, the broken floor, all of it still there, still damaged, still worn, but not empty, never empty. Ethan exhaled slowly. It was never haunted, he said. Scout looked up at him. Ethan nodded. It was holding the line. For the first time since he arrived, the house didn't feel like something he had to survive. It felt like something he had to protect. And Scout moved closer, resting against his leg. Ethan placed a hand on his back, steady, warm, alive. Yeah, he said quietly. They picked the wrong place. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Not a warning, not a threat. Just movement. And inside the house, for the first time, Ethan Cole wasn't alone. Not because of what was watching, but because of what had been waiting. Morning came slow over the Appalachian Ridge. A pale gray light slipped through the broken windows, stretching across the floorboards, touching the walls, settling into the corners that had held darkness all night. Ethan was already awake. He hadn't slept much. But this time, it wasn't because of fear. It was because something inside him had shifted, and it wouldn't let him rest. Scout lay near the doorway, head down but eyes open, watching the clearing like he had been all night, still guarding, still present. Ethan stepped outside. The air was cold but clean, the kind of cold that didn't bite. It steadied. The farm stretched out in front of him again. The same broken fence, the same leaning barn, the same overgrown field. But it didn't look abandoned anymore. Not to him. It looked unfinished. Ethan took a slow breath, letting the mountain air settle in his lungs. Then he turned back toward the house. All right, he said quietly. Scout was already on his feet. They started with the door. It hung off one hinge, splintered and useless. Ethan pulled it free and set it aside, clearing the frame. It wasn't about making it perfect. It was about making it hold. By midday, he had reinforced the entry with salvaged boards from the barn, rough, uneven, but strong. Scout stayed close the entire time, limping slightly, but refusing to leave Ethan's side. Every sound in the woods still caught his attention, but he didn't react with fear anymore. He watched, measured, just like Ethan. They moved through the house next. Ethan covered the hole in the floor, not sealing it, not hiding it, but reinforcing it, making it something he could open and close on his terms. Control. That mattered now. He cleaned what he could, cleared debris, opened windows, let light in. The house responded. Not in a way you could see all at once, but piece by piece the weight lifted. The air moved easier. The shadows didn't cling as tightly. By the second day, the place didn't feel like it was collapsing anymore. It felt like it was standing again. On the third day, someone came. Not the men from before. A truck, older, slower. It stopped at the edge of the clearing. Ethan didn't rush. He stepped out onto the porch, Scout at his side. The man who got out looked tired. Not old, but worn. The kind of wear that didn't come from age, but from years that didn't let go. He raised a hand slowly. "I heard someone was up here," the man said. Ethan didn't respond right away. The man nodded once. "Didn't think it'd be you." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do I know you?" The man shook his head. "No, but I knew your father." The words landed harder than anything else had. Ethan stepped down from the porch slowly. Scout stayed with him. "What do you want?" Ethan asked. The man glanced at the house, then at the land, then back at Ethan. "Same thing you do," he said quietly. Ethan held his gaze, yet the man didn't look away. "Place like this," he continued. "It ain't for people who got somewhere else to go." Ethan didn't argue, because it was true. The man took a breath. "I was here once," he said. "A long time ago." Ethan's chest tightened slightly. The man looked toward the barn. "Your father helped me," he added. Silence stretched between them. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. "How?" The man shrugged faintly. "Gave me a place to land," he said. "When everything else fell apart." Ethan nodded slowly. The words matched. The files. The room below. The truth. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a refuge. The man shifted his weight. "I heard people were asking about this place again," he said. "Didn't like the sound of it." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the tree line. "Yeah," he said. "Oh, they came by." The man nodded once. "Figures." Scout stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Ethan and the man, not aggressive, just aware. The man noticed. "Good dog," he said. Scout didn't react. Ethan rested a hand lightly on his neck. "He is," he said. The man looked at Ethan again. "So what now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked out across the land. The broken fences, the empty space, the house behind him, the tunnel beneath it, the names, the truth. Then he looked back at the man. "We keep it," Ethan said. "Simple. Clear." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That's what I figured." He turned back toward his truck, then paused. "You're not going to be alone out here," he added. Ethan didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. The man got back into his truck, and drove off. And for the first time, someone had come to the farm without trying to take something from it. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch. Scout lay beside him, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but still alert. The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the land. The house stood behind them, stronger now. Not perfect, but standing. Lights would come later. Repairs would come later. People would come later. Ethan knew that now. This place wasn't meant to stay empty. It never had been. He looked down at Scout, resting a hand against his back. "You knew," he said quietly. Scout didn't move. Didn't need to. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he murmured. The wind moved through the trees, soft, steady. Not a warning, not a threat. Just movement. Just life. Ethan leaned back slightly, the eyes scanning the land one more time. No fear, no hesitation, just clarity. "This place," he said softly. Scout lifted his head slightly. Ethan's voice didn't waver. "It saves people." The words settled into the air. Not a guess, not a hope, a truth. Scout shifted closer, pressing against him. Ethan let his hand rest there. The last light of the day faded. The first stars began to show. And in the quiet that followed, for the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel lost. He felt exactly where he was supposed to be. And this time, he wasn't leaving. Not alone. Not ever again. If this story meant something to you, I want to hear from you. Drop a simple comment below. Type 1 if you believe loyalty, like Scout's, still exists in this world. Or type 0 if you think people have forgotten what it means to stand by someone no matter what. No long message needed. Just a number. And if you've ever felt like Ethan, like you had nothing left but kept going anyway, you're not the only one. Make sure you hit subscribe, because there are more stories like this coming. Stories about strength, loyalty, and the moments that change everything. And next time, you might just find yourself in one of them.